My friend Rob works as a flight attendant, and he told me a story about a specific red-eye flight from San Francisco to JFK that still bugs him to this day. It was a completely routine overnight run. As passengers were boarding, Rob distinctly remembers greeting a well-dressed man in his early 40s carrying a sleek leather briefcase near the front door. The man smiled, walked down the aisle, and took his seat near the very back of the plane, close to the lavatories. Before pushing back from the gate, the flight crew performed their standard head count. Exactly 35 passengers had boarded the aircraft. Because it was an overnight flight, the cabin lights were dimmed, and almost everyone slept through the cross-country trip. Everything was smooth, quiet, and completely uneventful. During the flight, one of the other flight attendants even had a brief friendly conversation with the well-dressed man near the galley. He talked warmly about his wife and 2 daughters waiting for him back home. Nothing about him seemed out of the ordinary. As the plane began its final descent into New York, the crew conducted their final safety sweep and recounted the cabin. But when they tallied the numbers, they kept coming up short. There were only 34 passengers in their seats. Assuming someone was just washing up before landing, they went to check the rear lavatories. Both were completely empty and unlocked. Confused, the crew scanned the cabin again and realized the empty seat belonged to the well-dressed man at the back of the plane. His briefcase was gone, and there was no trace of him anywhere. Upon landing at JFK, the crew immediately notified airport security to hold the aircraft while they investigated. When gate agents pulled up the master manifest and checked in passenger data back at SFO, the system showed that only 34 people had ever scanned a ticket for the flight. Yet 2 crew members had greeted him, counted him, and spoken with him at 30,000 feet. As someone who used to fly small planes, I'm used to looking out of aircraft windows and identifying standard air traffic. I know what helicopters, commercial jets, and private planes look like at various altitudes. A few years ago, I was on a daytime commercial flight heading from Europe back to the United States. I had a window seat, and I spent most of the flight glued to the glass, watching the landscape pass by below. Across Europe, everything was normal, plenty of standard traffic scattered across the sky. Then came the vast, empty stretch over the Atlantic Ocean, followed by the dense wilderness of Canada. Eventually, we made landfall over Maine and New Hampshire, where civilization began to dot the landscape again. That's when something caught my eye near the ground. Flying far below our jet, just barely above the treetop level, was a smooth, metallic circular disc. It was zipping across farmlands and small towns at an incredible speed. Because of my aviation background, my eyes locked onto it instantly. I kept watching, waiting to see if it would perform an impossible sharp turn or come to a sudden, dead stop in midair. Right at that exact moment, a flight attendant tapped me on the shoulder to ask if I wanted coffee or tea. Frantic not to lose sight of the object, I blurted out coffee as fast as I could and jerked my head right back to the window. It was completely gone. I scanned the tree line and the open fields, but there was no trace of the disc anywhere. I tried to shake it off, assuming it was just a strange optical illusion, but the truly unsettling part happened the next morning after I got home. I woke up in bed and checked the digital clock on my nightstand. It read 7:10 a.m. I got out of bed, sat down at my computer, and spent the next 2 hours answering emails, checking the news, and reading the weather. After finishing up, I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast, looked up at the wall clock, and it was still 7:10 a.m. The nightstand clock read the same. I had spent 2 hours awake in a world where time hadn't moved a single second. It was a dead Dove night red-eye flight, the kind where the cabin lights are dimmed to a faint blue and almost every single passenger is fast asleep. I've never been able to sleep on airplanes, so I was sitting quietly in the dark, staring into the aisle, listening to the hum of the engines. Everything was completely peaceful until a sharp, frantic voice cut through the quiet from a few rows behind me. A young girl, who looked to be around mid-teens, started screaming at the top of her lungs. "Mama, Mama." The sheer panic in her voice woke up half the cabin. 2 flight attendants immediately rushed down the narrow aisle to her row. I watched them lean over the seat, try to assess the situation, and then turn around and break into a full sprint back toward the galley. Seconds later, they came running back down the aisle, holding a portable automated external defibrillator. The quiet cabin was suddenly filled with the frantic sounds of medical equipment, hushed, panicked whispers, and the girl's uncontrollable sobbing. After several agonizing minutes, the flight attendants gently escorted the hysterical teenager down the aisle toward the front galley, out of sight of the rest of the passengers. Moments later, an attendant walked back to the row, carrying a stack of heavy airplane blankets. They draped them completely over the seat. The rest of the flight was conducted in a heavy, suffocating silence. Everyone knew what had happened, but no one dared to say it out loud. When the plane finally touched down and taxied to the gate, the captain came over the intercom with a flat, solemn voice, ordering every single passenger to remain strictly in their seats with their seatbelts fastened. The cabin doors opened, and paramedic team rushed on board with a stretcher. We sat frozen in our seats as they wheeled a blanket-covered body down the center aisle, followed closely by the sobbing, broken teenager. Losing a parent is devastating under any circumstances, but being trapped in tight quarters at 30,000 feet, rounded by strangers with nowhere to go, is an isolation no one should ever have to endure.